Perfect. All right, hello folks, welcome, welcome. As I'm sure some of you might have heard our executive director say just now, if you were in from the waiting room, we'll be starting in a couple of minutes, just letting folks trickle in. We have a really good turnout today expected for our conversation on lighting, and important, and as we've been discussing on the phone before y'all joined, an important yet very little understood by many area. So we're incredibly excited to see so many people coming out. And as we wait for others to join, please feel free to say hello in the chat. Pop in anything you're particularly excited about hearing today, any interesting insights that you might have from your work on the topic of lighting, just to get the juices flowing before we get started in a minute or two.
And by way of intro, while I've lived in Massachusetts for 25 years, I actually did a lot of growing up in Connecticut, and I have a lot of family.
Oh, wonderful. I didn't realize that. Where from?
Mostly in the Northwest, in the Litchfield Hills, and in Washington, New Preston, Cornwall area.
Beautiful area.
It's
Very
lovely.
Beautiful areas. And no wonder you appreciate a good night sky. That's one of the
that was certainly
that
was a formative thing for me, having the Milky Way overhead and visible.
Sure.
All right. Well, it's about 3 after. We have. It looks like the trickle-ins have started to slow. I'm sure we'll get a couple of more, but we'll be sure to add folks. And with that, I'm happy to get us rolling. Hello all, my name is Joya Cannell. I am the Vice Chair of the Connecticut Green Building Council. And today I'm joined by Kate and James, who will introduce themselves momentarily. And we're thrilled to kick off our virtual events for the summer with Designing the Sky, How Outdoor Lighting Can Protect Human Health and Wildlife. And with that, James, feel free to switch to the next slide. This event really fits in with a lot of work that Connecticut Green Building Council has been doing to achieve our mission in a variety of ways. So our mission here at CTGBC is to accelerate the health, resilient, equitable, and sustainable transformation of Connecticut's built environment. And we are committed to doing this by facilitating design, construction, and operation through education, advocacy, and green certifications and standards. With that, I'm also going to quickly review some of our session etiquette. So as you might have noticed when you joined the call, the webinar will be recorded. Please feel free to use the chat to ask questions as you think of them. Caitlin will be listing out any written chat questions at the end of the event. But also at the end, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask your questions directly of James. And we're really looking forward to having an engaging discussion towards the end of the hour. And finally, this is a great opportunity for us to really celebrate the work that members of Connecticut Green Building Council do to make our built environment safer, healthier, happier, and more sustainable. And we welcome all of you, whether you're a member or not a member yet, to join and get engaged. Benefits of membership include discounted admission to events, professional development, education, and advancement. We're a really, really active board full of committed folks in the built environment that are really pushing the envelope and pushing the industry forward. And it's a great way to network and make a difference in your community. So I really can't stress enough how wonderful it is being a member. So whether you're new to Connecticut Green Building Council or have been here for a while but would like to start volunteering, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We'll be dropping the link to our email in the chat momentarily at the end of the event. And of course, we also welcome sponsorship. And we have a wonderful sponsor for this event, Apex, who Caitlin will introduce as she kicks us off for the meat of our content today. So thank you. Next slide, and Caitlin, take it away.
Yeah, so I'm Kate Tosco. I'm a board advisor for the CTGBC this year, and I have a special interest in lighting. Our virtual event today is the first in a series of lighting-related virtual and in-person events that the CTGBC is planning to hold during 2022. We're currently planning an interior lighting session focused on healthy lighting and the WELL building standard, as well as a walking tour of New Haven focused on observing various lighting conditions at dusk. Today's session, Designing the Sky, How Outdoor Lighting Can Protect Human Health and Wildlife, will be presented today by Dr. James Lowenthal. James is the Mary Elizabeth Moses Professor of Astronomy at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. Professor Lowenthal uses some of the largest telescopes on Earth and in space to study the formation and evolution of galaxies in the early universe, as well as exoplanets orbiting stars in our own Milky Way galaxy. He leads the Massachusetts chapter of the International Dark Sky Association and a local dark sky advocacy group, Northampton City Lights. He is a member of the American Astronomical Society's Committee on Light Pollution, Radio Interference, and Space Debris, and he advocates internationally for protection of the night sky against light pollution from the ground and now from satellite megaconstellations such as SpaceX Starlinks. He spends as much time outdoors under the stars as he can. Next slide, please. And on behalf of the Connecticut Green Building Council, I'm so pleased to have Apex Lighting and Building Solutions as the sponsor for this event today. Apex has been a strong supporter of the Connecticut Green Building Council, including participating in our recent Great Give campaign. We truly appreciate their work in the field and their commitment to the Connecticut Green Building Council's mission. Apex is a premier lighting, controls, integrated building solutions, and architectural products representative agency throughout New England. They take great pride in their relationships and are excited to be sponsoring this event for the CTGBC. Thank you, Apex, for your support and for your work. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Lowenthal.
Thank you so much, Kate and Joya and the Connecticut GBC, and thanks to the good folks at Apex, and thanks to all of you for coming today. I know that there are some, in addition to Kate, other lighting experts among you, and you may or may not get as much as others might get of our discussion today, but I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I will try and monitor the chat in case things pop up there as well. One of my favorite times of the day is this time, dusk, when the sun is going down behind you. You see that dark line of blue just above the horizon. That's the Earth's shadow rising up as the sun goes down behind you, and the full moon rising here over the fields of Northampton. And it's a magical time. It's a time when animals are coming out as well as stars are coming out. And there's a whole side of the world that is kind of magic. And one thing I love to do is go out in the middle of the night on my skis in the winter. Here's a frozen lake, Lake Fitzgerald here in Northampton, in the full moon, so bright that you practically need dark glasses to see. You know, navigating is just completely trivial in this kind of moonlight in the wintertime. but it's not always perfect. Here in Northampton, here on what we call Sunset Hill, here are some of the brightest stars in the winter sky. The Milky Way is actually right. You can just barely see it, this sort of diagonal line across the sky, just barely. Why is it so hard to see? There's all this other light shining up into the sky and making the sky bright. And here's where it's coming from partly. There's a prison complex just over the hill. This is the Hampshire County Jail. And you see immediately the dome of light coming from there, but it's also coming from the city of Springfield to our south. You can see the difference in the sky brightness in the lower left versus the upper right. Here's a close-up of the jail. Close-up meaning from, you know, a good half a mile away with a telephoto lens. And you see those lights are shining not just down on the prison complex, but into the eyes of the viewer from a half a mile away and up into the sky. This is what the Milky Way should look like. This is seen from Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, one of the darkest places in North America. Studded with stars, and you feel a deep connection here with the thousands of generations who have come before, of sky gazers, of people who revere the night sky, who still use it today for their cultural practices, many indigenous groups around the world. Not just astronomers, nature lovers, people pay good money to go to sites around the world that have a view like this. This view is over our heads every clear night, but most of us can't see it because of light pollution. Here's a view of Smith College, where I'm sitting right now, about 100 years ago, a little bit more. And this is the main road, Route 9. Route 9 traverses the whole state of Massachusetts. That's Route 9 there, heading towards Williamsburg. And there's one street light here, there it is. And now here's the view today. And it's just a parade of street lights up and down the street, and super bright, a lot of glare, and I would say overlit. Here's our Forbes Library in downtown 100 years ago. And here it is today with these lollipop lights with the light shining, most of it straight up into the sky instead of even down on the sidewalk. Here's the main intersection in Northampton in the 20s. And here it is today, again, flooded with light. Here is City Hall in Northampton with then President Coolidge, who was mayor of Northampton before he was President Coolidge, and Grace Coolidge's wife addressing the crowd. And here's City Hall today with the lights really outshining that full moon behind you. Here's a parade in downtown Northampton. If these people waited for night, they would look up if it were clear and see the Milky Way overhead. Now what you look up and see is the clouds are illuminated from beneath. They're bright white. The Milky Way, forget about it, completely washed out by the city lights. So where do all these lights come from? Well, they come from this bowling alley. They come from this empty parking lot or this parking garage, this municipal parking garage with the light spilling out through the open windows. Here's the top deck of the parking lot. Nobody there, lights spilling out all over the place, including bouncing off the deck and shining up into the sky. Another empty parking lot, lights on all night long. From this one, from this one, from this one, and this one. They're all over the place, commercial, municipal, residential. Here's a spot right next to the garage in downtown that has a restaurant. You can see it in the lower left, Patria. Lovely restaurant with outdoor seating, but who would want to sit there in this kind of environment? I mean, this is not inviting. It's not beautiful. It's not romantic. Here's a church lit up like Times Square in the back, ostensibly to prevent crime, which I think is a fruitless attempt here. How do we get there? Here's one of the first streetlights in the country, the first gas street lamp in Baltimore from 200 years ago, 1817. It was designed, you can see the design, it's got this glass side so the light will go out. It had a gas flame in there that had something less than 1,000 lumens. So the equivalent of less than 100 candles worth of light coming out of that lamp. Here is the same design 200 years later with more than 5,000 lumens in it, right here in Northampton. Total overkill. That light is pouring out. This is a terrible match of the amount of light coming out and the design of the light. The light was designed for a small amount of light, and we've stuck a large amount of light in there. And what we have as a result is very strong glare and light trespass. And that avenue is now closed to traffic, and it's open to restaurant seating. And when you sit there, you get a headache from the light. You see that guy there, he's covering his eyes to, I don't know, I'm just kidding. But you know, when I go there, I actually do see people like this shielding their eyes from the street lights. So that's just poor lighting design. Here's a main intersection on the outskirts of Northampton, Interstate 91 and Route 9 near the Coolidge Bridge over the Connecticut River. This is when it was under construction, new roundabout, in the light of the full moon, which, by the way, has a brightness. If you hold out your hand, the amount of moonlight shining on your hand is about 0.01 foot candles in the standard lighting measurement, or about 0.1 lux, the European preferred standard for measuring illuminance. So that's moonlight. But then the lights got installed, and now we have about 5 foot candles everywhere in that intersection, about 500 times brighter than moonlight. Here is the Roundhouse parking lot in Northampton with the old lighting, and it's recently been redone. And I don't have a new picture yet, but I'm very eager to see what the new lights are going to look like, especially because they are being installed with controls. And the controls will be able to dim the lights down by any schedule and by any amount that the city deems appropriate and right for the setting. Ironically, the roundhouse here was used for coal gasification, to turn coal into gas to illuminate street lights and lights in people's houses 200 years ago. Where else does bad lighting occur? People's houses. Here again is an old historic light fixture that was made to hold 3 candles each. But what happens if you stick 3 bright LED so-called candles into it? Now we've got, again, high glare, and this is counterproductive. When you walk past this house, you have to shield your eyes because it's blinding. Same thing here, historic house, historic property, historic neighborhood, and the owners stuck these bright blue LED lights at ground level facing sideways. So the idea here is to illuminate the pathway, but instead they're just completely blinding any visitor. I mean, it's worse than it's probably more effective than a guard dog at keeping people out. Here is a counterexample. These are neighbors across the street from me who installed these knee-level lights facing down only, warm color, dimmable, beautifully designed, no glare, no light trespass, does the job, illuminates the stairs, illuminates the path for their visitors coming and going. It's just right. So it totally can be done. It just takes the knowledge and the decision to do it. All right, so to summarize what I just said, what is light pollution in general? Light pollution is too much artificial light at night. It's poorly designed light. It's light that is maybe well designed, but poorly aimed. It's light that shines anywhere apart from down, light that shines out or even up into the sky, light that shines into the windows of neighboring properties, light that's on all night long, even when it's not needed, like this empty parking lot here in Northampton. Why is it a problem? And here is Tanglewood in Western Mass. Maybe some of you have come to performances at Tanglewood. The whole goal is experience nature, experience music and culture in this beautiful natural setting. You know, people drive from all over the place and they get out of their car and they're blinded by these lights that are shining right into their eyes. It's like a poke in the eye. It's exactly what you don't want in outdoor lighting. Why is this a problem? Well, it's actually bad for human health. It's bad for human safety. It wastes money and energy. It ruins the night sky, and it's bad for plants and animals. So a little bit more on each of those. Human health. Light pollution is associated with elevated rates of serious human diseases, including breast cancer and prostate cancer, but also diabetes, obesity, sleep disruption. How can this be? Well, sleep disruption, that makes sense. What about these other things? How could that be? Well, before we get there, just some basic data. These are just 2 of dozens of reports in the scientific literature studying exactly this effect. In the first one, the Harvard nurses study, they studied over 100,000 nurses over decades. And with this very, very rich data set, Harvard scientists were able to break up this large data set into nurses who lived in dark areas and nurses who lived in light polluted areas. And the nurses who lived in the light polluted areas had significantly higher rates of breast cancer. 14% is a very significant finding. Well, you might say, well, okay, that's just one study. Well, here's another study in Spain, same thing. Here they use satellites looking down to measure the amount of light pollution. There's a map of Spain in light pollution where dark blue is dark sky, and red and white are the middle of cities. That's Madrid in the middle. Again, they found the same thing, very highly elevated rates of cancer in the presence of light pollution. How could this be? Light is harmless. How could it possibly have anything to do with cancer? And in fact, there is a direct path that was identified over 10 years ago. We are programmed, our eyes, to look for the sun going down. The sun goes down, the amount of blue light goes down. Your eye detects that, sends a message to the brain, tells the brain to start producing melatonin. Melatonin then floods your whole body with this, it resets your body clock, your circadian rhythm. Every single function of human anatomy is on a 24-hour clock. It's in our DNA. We've inherited it from millions of years of evolution. Your respiration, your digestion, your sleepiness and wakefulness, everything is all regulated on a 24-hour clock, and it's reset every day by melatonin. When instead of the sun going down and the blue light dropping, instead we're flooded with blue light, which is what we're doing to our environment now, melatonin is suppressed. The production of melatonin is suppressed. And this crucial pathway is cut. What does this have to do with cancer? Turns out melatonin is a powerful cancer suppressant. So does light pollution cause cancer? No, but it inhibits your body's ability to fight cancer. In the presence of melatonin, tumors don't grow. In the absence of melatonin, tumors grow very quickly. This has been studied in the laboratory as well as epidemiologically. This is especially a problem now with new LED lights. Here are three different kinds of light: firelight, an old incandescent light, and a blue LED light, and their spectra, or amount of light of each color that is emitted by that kind of light. And you see the firelight emits mostly red light, less than 2% suppression of melatonin. The incandescent light also mostly emits red light. The top one, though, that represents a blue rich LED light, and you see there's this very, very strong blue bump right there. And it turns out that's exactly what your body is looking for as a signal to start producing melatonin. Now, that blue bump can be made smaller or larger depending on how we treat the LEDs. The technology totally exists, but the point is that all LEDs on the market now inherently have that blue bump. And if we don't choose LEDs that are treated to suppress that blue bump, then we're suppressing our melatonin as much as 80%. The American Medical Association recognized this problem and put out this report in 2016 saying, do not use lights bluer than 3000 Kelvin. So the higher the number, the more blue. The lower the number, the more sort of amber, towards the reddish yellowish part of the spectrum. Don't use lights bluer than 3000 K in the outdoors. And control glare. So what's glare? Here is one of many, many diagrams you can find on the internet. Just a cartoon of what glare is. Here on the left is a tall street light, and it's sending light in many directions. The yellow cone is the useful light, the light that's going down. The rest of the light, however, is coming out of the street light, but it's not useful. It's shining into that person's eyes. That's direct glare. It is far enough away that it's not actually helping them, but it is like a flashlight right in the eyes. It's poking in the eye. That's glare. It is reducing their visibility, their ability to see things. It's shining into those windows of that building. It's even shining directly up into the sky. Here's another such cartoon. Bad light on the left of the middle building, a good light on the right, the light shining down only instead of up or into the neighbor's window. So we don't need more lighting, we need better lighting. Here is a typical yard light stuck on the back of the wall in somebody's backyard. And if only you could just hold your hand up somehow and block the glare, that flashlight poking you in the eye, you would see there's actually an intruder standing there in the gateway. And he's standing in the first picture too. You just can't see him because of the glare. Glare is the culprit. We need to control that glare in order to improve visibility, which is the whole point. So glare interferes with good vision. We all know this from driving. You're behind the wheel of a car, there's a bright light shining in your eye. If that light weren't shining, maybe you would see the pedestrians about to cross the street. Glare is potentially a killer. It has been known for years. Here was a study from the 1970s that found when there's no oncoming car, you can see 700 feet down the road. With an oncoming car at night, that's cut down to as much as less as under 200 feet. We all know what this is like. You have to look away from the oncoming headlights. It's temporarily blinding. The Federal Highway Administration recognizes this as a serious problem, and it says glare is one of the most important elements to control in lighting systems. Okay, so glare is bad for human health, it's bad for human safety. It's a waste of money. Light pollution, I'm sorry, not just glare, light pollution. If you're shining the light into the sky, that was never the intent. Nobody designs lights, very few. We don't design them for that. We design them to shine down onto things on the ground for us to see. Light pollution costs as much as $3 billion a year in the United States alone, just from the light shining directly up into the sky. And this does not include all the lights that are on all night long that could be turned off when they're not needed, or that could be cut to 50%. And that would save billions of dollars more. Light at night is bad for wildlife. This screech owl needs darkness at night. Darkness is its habitat. We talk all the time about protecting habitat. The night is the habitat for the vast majority of animals. It is something that is in our hands to protect. About 3/4 of mammals are nocturnal. The bat in the background is nocturnal. This hardworking opossum mom crossing the street outside my house is nocturnal. She's heading to bed for the day. This red fox in my backyard is nocturnal. Light pollution affects all of them negatively. It affects their ability to find food, to reproduce, to migrate. And that ripples through the entire ecosystem. It's not just one species, they're all connected, and they're all affected by light pollution. Birds die by the hundreds of millions in the United States every year due to light pollution, as much as 1 billion birds per year. They crash into buildings, they circle endlessly, they get pulled off course. During migration season, which just ended in May, as much as 100,000 to 1 million birds are flying over your head every night here in Connecticut and Massachusetts. And they are depending on a dark night sky. These sea turtles, they hatch on the beach, and they're programmed to look for the light of the stars and the moon glinting on the water and head for the water. Nowadays, what happens is they pop their heads out of the sand and they head for the mall. They said they see the lights of the mall and they go the wrong direction. And now if you look under a street light at hatching time, you'll sometimes see dozens or hundreds of baby sea turtles dead under that street light. It's a serious problem that is threatening them with extinction. These migrating birds, all in my neighborhood, they flew all the way up from South America and passed through. I photographed them within a mile of my house. This one in the lower right here, this yellow-throated vireo, also came all the way up from the Caribbean, only to die in Northampton, probably from crashing into a building that was illuminated at night or circling overhead until it died from exhaustion. Most birds that migrate, which is 40% of all birds, 80% of them migrate at night, and they use the stars to navigate. So again, during migration season, that river of birds is flying over your head at night while we're sleeping. Not just in the air, not just on land, animals in the sea as well. Migrating fish are affected by light pollution. Whenever there's a bridge crossing over a river, if the lights are shining down from the bridge into the water, that works as a barrier that affects all the species in that river. These are just a few of the institutes around the country that are devoted to studying this issue, the effect of light and artificial light at night on animals. One of the world leaders in this, Richard Stevens, was at UConn, unfortunately passed away just a couple of years ago. What's your favorite insect? Chances are it's one of these fireflies here on a dark night on the island in the Connecticut River in July a couple of years ago. Insects are threatened by light pollution. Fireflies in particular completely depend on darkness to find each other. That's what they're doing with their flashes to mate. There are species of fireflies that are threatened with extinction due to light pollution. And the biologists remind us it's not just the uplight, it's the downlight as well. The insects, the bats, the mammals, the amphibians, they don't want any artificial light at night. It all matters to them. They need their natural darkness to thrive. Here's a street light outside my house buzzing with insects. By the end of the night, thousands of those bugs will have died. And of course, that ripples through the whole ecosystem. The animals that depend on it, the pollination that should happen as a result of those insects. Here's a summary of negative effects on insects, different species of insects, by light at night, artificial light at night. This is in a paper by Avalon Owens, who's a grad student at Tufts University, studying specifically insects and fireflies. Not just nighttime, but even daytime pollinators like this monarch butterfly are affected by light at night. Here is the park in downtown Northampton, Pulaski Park. That's sort of the little jewel in downtown that was recently rebuilt. Beautiful design, very, very people friendly. All kinds of great events happen here. And one of the great things that happened is the city said, yes, you volunteers, please do design and install this pollinator garden that you see on the left and the right, a pollinator garden to attract pollinating insects during the day. Well, that's great. But then what do? We blast them with these bright blue unshielded lights at night. It's a death trap. So we attract them by day, we kill them at night. This park is 10 to 15 times brighter than some city parks in New York City. It's much, much brighter than it needs to be. This is recognized as a serious, serious problem for all wildlife at the very highest levels. This is the report from the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which is a United Nations level agency, which issued this resolution last year, pointing out many of the things I've been telling you, that light pollution is bad for animals, and coming up with 8 recommendations, including obvious things. Don't use more light than you need to. Make sure the light goes down only, switch the light off when it's not needed, etc. Here's another United Nations level report that I helped work on. This is an advisory report to the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, which included a big section on the effect of light pollution on the natural world. And again, we found much of the same findings and had much of the same recommendations, including avoid glare, avoid blue light, avoid unnecessary illumination. World Migratory Bird Day. Every May and October, they recognize 2 days to draw attention to the needs of migratory birds. Every year they have a theme. This year, the theme was light pollution and the importance of fighting light pollution to try to protect migratory birds. So to just wrap up this section on wildlife, all life needs darkness at night. We all know that if you take the wetland, if you take the water out of the wetland, the frogs will all die. But similarly, if you take the darkness out of the wetland, the frogs will all die. They depend on darkness at night just as much as they depend on water. And light pollution ruins the view of the stars. Here's downtown Northampton again with some of the brightest stars in the winter sky rising. You can barely see them. Here's just a few miles away, just 10 miles out of town, much darker sky and a much more beautiful view. It's much easier to connect then with our ancestors, with the Native Americans who were on the same place, looking at exactly the same stars, with all of human history, with all the myths that we've inherited in our culture. Everything in our life is touched by astronomy in some way. Let's see, today is Wednesday. That stands for the god Woden. It's associated with, let's see, Mercury, and every day of the week has a similar association with one of the planets, or the 5 planets, or the sun or the moon. And our year, of course, is guided by astronomy. So all these connections go back generations and generations. And with light pollution, we cut most of those connections. Here's what the sky looks like under different lighting conditions. On the far right, pristine dark sky. The far left, inner city sky. And yeah, thanks for the Melissa Kops for the fun fact about McLeish Field Station, which is exactly what that picture was of the nice sky. That is one of the first living buildings certified in the country. The United States National Park Service recognizes a dark night sky as as a natural resource. It's like clean air or clean water. It's a resource that needs to be protected. It's a resource that everybody has a right to. All humans have a right to see the night sky. It is an affront to that human right to produce light pollution that ruins the view of the night sky. And here is an international level starlight declaration that says basically the same thing. Okay, how bad's the problem? How fast is it growing? Here was light pollution in the late 50s, in the late 70s. This is obviously the United States. 1997, and here's projecting forward a couple of years. The whole eastern seaboard is completely blanketed with light pollution. Everything east of the Mississippi is light polluted, except for a few very small pockets in Maine and the Adirondacks. This recent study found that light pollution globally was growing at least 2% per year. That's twice the rate of population growth. So it's not just that we're making more people and each one comes with more light. We're actually using more light per person around the world. Here's another similar study that found light pollution is up at least 49% since 1992, and it could be as much as 400%. Why the uncertainty? Because the satellites that look down and measure these things are not sensitive to the blue light that comes from the LEDs. So if most new LEDs are actually 4000 K, which is very blue, then light pollution is actually as much as 400% worse than it was in 1992. Let's get a little bit more local. Here's Connecticut light pollution. I recommend this map highly. It's lightpollutionmap.info. That's the website, lightpollutionmap.info. You can go anywhere in the world and zoom in, zoom out, and see what the light pollution is like where you live or where you want to go. And if you wanted to go on a vacation where you wanted to see the Milky Way and the stars, you could use this map to do it. And you can see here that Hartford, for example, has a sky that is 32.6 times brighter than natural. That's what that ratio means. Bortle class 8 or 9, that's out of 9. 1 is the best, darkest sky, 9 is the worst. So Hartford is right there among the worst. While up here in the very northwest corner with Massachusetts and New York State, up in the hills, the Litchfield Hills there, the foothills of the Berkshires, it's down to just 37% brighter than natural. It's not even twice as bright as natural. That's what this 0.372 is. A much darker sky. You could definitely see the Milky Way from there. And you see, of course, the light pollution is just following the I-95 and I-91 corridors and the other highways in cities and towns. All right, how does it happen? Where does it all come from? Well, here's the street outside my house when the street light was broken. Hallelujah for me, you know, I could see the stars, but then the light came back on and there it is. That's the old high pressure sodium light, the light that we all grew up with, that sort of yellowish, pinkish legacy street light that we all know from the last 50 years. I took this picture because I knew it was about to be replaced with a new LED. Here it is, get ready. That's the new LED. So here was before, here's after. This is the same camera, the same lens, the same setting, the same location, everything. But there's the old light, here's the new light. Much more glare, much more light trespass, much more blue light. I petitioned the city and got a shield installed so it doesn't shine directly into my house, but standing in the same part of the street, it looks pretty much the same as this picture shows. It's blinding. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that it's not just ground-based light pollution that we're grappling with here. These are Starlink satellites from Elon Musk's company SpaceX that have leapt into onto the radar of astronomers like myself. This is a new problem. We've had light pollution on our radar for a long time. In the last 3 years, we have this new problem: the satellites zipping across the telescope field of view, and you can see a lot of these naked eye, and we can talk more about this if you like, but I just wanted to mention this. Okay, back to ground-based light. Don't we need it? Don't we have to have light pollution in order to have safety? Isn't more light always better? And doesn't more light mean less crime? Okay, wait a second. If that were true, then New York City would be one of the safest places in the world. But we know that's not true, right? We think about the most heavily illuminated cities in the country, like Philadelphia and Newark. These are the ones with the highest crime rates. It just does not follow that more light equals less crime. It's tempting to think so. It's deeply ingrained. It's probably in our genetic makeup that we're afraid of the dark and more light seems better, but it just ain't so that more light equals less crime. And we saw this already. Here is a short list of studies looking at this question. Is there a direct link between lighting and crime? When you put lights in, do you get less crime? If you take lights out, do you get more crime? The answer is no. The answer is, after decades of study by dozens and dozens of different groups, academic groups, police groups, all different kinds of scholars studying this, the answer is there is no consensus. There's some studies find, yeah, there's a link. Some studies find, no, there isn't a link. Here's a meta study that from 2015 that looked at a whole bunch that said, no, there's no evidence for an association. Here is one from 97 from the National Institute of Justice, which you would think would really, be vested in finding the best ways to prevent crime. And they say we can have very little confidence that improved lighting prevents crime, and on and on. There's no consensus. Again, you'll find studies one way, an equal number the other way. If it were a clear result and such a strong effect that the way everybody thinks there is, then why have we not been able to find it in the evidence? Here's a very local example, back to Northampton. Terrible light on a parking lot in downtown. It's a new LED light. It's terribly shielded, high glare, very blue, really ugly in my view, lots of light trespass. And while I was taking this picture, a guy ran out from a local bar, unzipped his fly, and ducked into that bush right there and took a leak. And so he's in there right now while I'm taking this picture. Okay, is public urination the worst crime? Of course not. This is just to say, most of us would say, well, that's sort of undesirable behavior, and the light had nothing to do with it. It just doesn't stop anything at all. Here's another example. The car outside my car was burglarized twice. It's a Prius, and the vandals came to get the catalytic converter. And the first time they didn't get it, but it was a couple $100 of repair. The second time they got it. It's a $1,000 repair, and then they sell it on the black market for the metals in. Where was the car? Directly under that street light outside my house. Did it stop the theft? Of course not at all. Okay, what's the goal of outdoor lighting? Safety. It's always about safety. It's safety through better visibility, so we can see stuff better. That's the point. So what are some simple rules for better visibility? Eliminate glare. Glare is the flashlight shining in your eyes. We all know what it's like. How do you use a flashlight? You take a flashlight, you shine it away from your eyes at the thing you're trying to see, at the street, at the sidewalk, at your feet. You don't shine it in your eyes. That's what glare does. Prefer warm colors over blue. Eliminate blue as much as possible. Why? For the health reasons we just talked about, and because it actually produces worse glare in your eyes. And dial back on the brightness to avoid high contrast. If you have a really, really bright light, then you can illuminate something well, but everything else seems much darker, and it's hard for the eye to adjust to that. Finally, take advantage of smart controls. This is getting easier and easier with LEDs. It's all electronically enabled, and smart controls are fantastic. Here's a rule of thumb. You should not be able to see the source of the light itself, the light bulb or the LED, whatever it is, unless you're right underneath it. It should shine down only. This bottom picture shows a light from a block away when I can see the LEDs directly. That's not good. That's poorly shielded. Here is an example of a fully shielded light where the light is going to go down only, and you stand more than a block away, you won't see the direct light source, only the thing underneath it. A good example of a well-shielded light on the Smith College campus there in the lower right. This is sliced and diced. So you lighting experts know this stuff inside out. This is the bug rating, backlighting, uplighting, and glare. The light comes out of a light fixture in possibly all different directions, and we can measure that. And if you now buy a fixture, or you're speccing fixtures for a project, it comes with a bug rating, backlighting, uplighting, and glare that is tied to this table here that tells you how much light is coming out in each one of these different sections. And there are various specifications, various cities and towns and state regulations that say, well, don't use glare worse than G2 in this setting, or worse than G0 in a sensitive environmental setting. Here is, again, Pulaski Park in Northampton. How are we going to fix this problem? What do we do? What are the solutions? Number one, again, the light should go down only. Not like the one on the left, like the one on the right. Not like the thing on the left, like this one here. Not like these, instead like these. Very bad on the left, much better on the right. Again, the green light is good. Make sure that's the only light coming out. Avoid that red and orange light there. Don't install the light like this. Oh, God, this is so frustrating. This is a perfectly usable light, but it's been installed at the wrong angle. It should be installed like this. Fortunately, they fixed it. You know what they were thinking when they put this light in. They were thinking, well, I want the light to go over sideways to illuminate the parking lot. What they didn't realize is they could do that perfectly well like this, without the glare, without the light trespass, without the sky glow, if they just installed it horizontally. Now, we had a little chat just before about theater lighting. Anybody who's been to live theater in the last, well, just think about your favorite live theater. Think about the lighting there. It's carefully designed not to shine in the audience's eyes. It's like the #1 rule of theater lighting. Send the light onto the stage, not onto the audience. Everybody in the audience, when you're sitting there, you can turn to your neighbor and see them perfectly well. There's plenty of soft ambient light bouncing off the stage and so on, but there's no direct light, no glare shining from the theater lights directly on you. That's what we should do in the outdoors as well. That's what we do in our indoors. We use things called lampshades for your living room or your bedroom. We should do the same thing with our outdoor lighting. Number 2, minimize the blue light. I would hate to live in this house, in this development in Northampton, with this unshielded bright blue light shining into my window. It is literally making those residents sick. Fortunately, the technology is there. It's a solved problem. There are plenty of lights, street lights available with less blue than 3000 K. Here are a bunch of cities that have adopted them. Here are some even that have adopted 2200 K. That's now getting to the sort of amber color of the high pressure sodium lights we all grow up with, that had no problem with crime at all or safety, right? That was the industry standard until LEDs. And then suddenly LEDs happen, and suddenly there was this big rush to make 5000 K super blue lights everywhere. But fortunately, 2200 K is now readily available and has been installed. You can go see it in these cities. 3, minimize the brightness. Turn the lights down when they're not needed. You know how every street light has that little hat sitting on the top of it? It's possibly a photocell that just says, oh, the sun's gone down, time to turn the light on. But you can also get one that has a timer that says, oh, it's after midnight, turn the light down to half or 10% of its brightness when everybody's in bed anyway. It's hardly needed at all to protect wildlife, to protect human health, to save energy. If you're going to replace an old high pressure sodium light like the one on the left with an LED like the one on the right on the same street, on the same light pole here, don't replace it with equal number of lumens, not 100% of the original lumens. 1/3 will do. Why? Because the LEDs are directed straight down. They're more efficient use of the light. There's, in fact, little or no benefit to illuminating anything brighter than about 0.2 foot candles. If the goal is pedestrian safety, this study from 2019 found that above 0.2 foot candles, there's a plateau in safety. And in fact, there's just no benefit. So why then does Mass Department of Transportation feel the need to illuminate this new roundabout at 50 lux or 5 foot candles? More than 10 times as bright as what these researchers found was needed for pedestrian safety. There's also in the industry, and I can imagine I'm maybe throwing a bomb here, maybe we'll have a discussion about this, but there's a very strong culture of seeking evenness of illumination. But I think this is poorly supported by the evidence. There's a fear of the so-called ladder effect, where it goes bright, dark as you go down the road. But in fact, that's a much smaller problem than the problem of glare, the much, much higher contrast of the light shining directly in your eyes. It's much better to shield the light, have the light go down, and suffer a little bit of bright, dark, like the picture on the left. And in fact, Nancy Clanton of Clanton Associates in Colorado says, she studied this extensively, it turned out that uniform lighting actually gave the worst results at detecting pedestrians. As drivers are going down the road, it turns out it's actually better to have lighting like the lighting on the left that's a little bit contrasty. That actually gave the best visibility results. And that's what we're after with outdoor lighting. This is all summarized. Some of you are probably members of the Illuminating Engineering Society, the IES. They partnered with the International Dark Sky Association to come up with these 5 principles of outdoor lighting. And it's like motherhood and apple pie. Who wouldn't agree with all of these? All light should have a clear purpose, but it's worth stating it. All light should be directed only where it's needed, not up in the sky. Use the lowest light levels. Control the light, turn it off when it's not needed. Avoid blue colors, use warmer colors. Northampton has adopted those, and many other cities and towns. So are good lights available? Of course. You don't have to buy a light like this that shines right up into the sky. You could get one that looks just the same, but it is set up inside the fixture so it doesn't produce direct glare. Burlington, Vermont, Mystic, Connecticut have these really good lights right in downtown, well shielded. Berlin, Connecticut, the Amtrak station, similar. Versus the one here in Northampton, even though it's down only, it's actually, there's a lot of glare, a lot of sideways light in this poor design. You have to block it with your hand. Plenty of good lights available here in Northampton. It's illuminating what you want to illuminate, the sign, the front of the storefront, not shining on your eyes. Same thing here. Same thing here, Smith College campus. Very good lights that give you a beautiful view of the night sky over Smith's Paradise Pond. And Smith just hired one of the best lighting designers in the country, not Suzanne, yeah, Suzanne Tillotson from New York City, who did this beautiful design outside Smith's new library. The lights are all on in this picture. I challenge you to actually see where the lights are coming from above the grass. It's almost impossible to see the lights themselves. Here, I'll use my cursor. I don't know if you can see it. Here it is. You can barely see the light itself, but it's casting this beautiful light on these concrete benches and on the grass. It's safe, inviting, warm, friendly, with no glare, no light trespass, no uplighting. It's easy to do. You just have to take the time to do it right. Fortunately, some businesses in Northampton have been willing to turn their bad lights into good lights. They pay the money to send somebody up in a cherry picker and just adjust it so it's horizontal. This business let me go up on a ladder and turn their glary lights into much better shielded lights. Same thing here. We went up on a ladder and turned those glare bombs into lights that instead illuminate the sign they're supposed to, instead of blinding drivers and pedestrians. Here's a good light. It's in a can, it's shining down. Here's a good light. It's a walkway light for a residence. If you happen to have a porch light that is like this, an old lantern style that shines light in all directions, just put one of these light bulbs in. That's only 5 watts and it sends the light straight down, just the way it's supposed to be. If you want walkway lighting or deck lighting, this is a perfect solution. Solar powered, nice amber color, 2700K, I think, and cheap and effective. I have these in my backyard. Where can you find these? All over the place. You can go to the International Dark Sky Association if you want. They actually review lights and list ones that they approve. Here's another observatory in Quebec that does a similar thing, approves good lights. Or you could just go to Home Depot or Lowe's, and they have a section on dark sky friendly lights. These are good lights to use in your project or your house. Connecticut has laws regulating this. Here is a link to some of them. This is just a summary of Connecticut's outdoor lighting laws. Here is a summary of some of the laws that have and regulations put together by Leo Smith, my colleague, who is one of the experts he's a member of the IES Roadway Lighting Committee and a member of the IDA. He's the Northeast Regional Director of the IDA, International Dark Sky Association. He's given many talks in Connecticut on just this issue. This is one of the most recent on the building construction laws that basically say for private development, you have to adhere to this particular lighting code. Here's a partial list of cities and towns in Connecticut that have their own light pollution ordinances. So in summary, light pollution is bad. It's bad for animals and plants, humans, public safety, the economy, quality of life. It's bad for our view of the starry sky. And it's easy to fix. Fix it just by using light only where you need it, when you need it, the right kind of light at the right time in the right place. It's a win-win. There's no reason not to do this. There's no reason. And I'll just close then with this view of the Connecticut River with the comet Neowise passing over just 2 years ago, a view that everybody should have been able to see. It was one of the brightest comets of a lifetime, one of the brightest I've ever seen. And instead, most people completely missed it. Most people had to travel to see it at all. And then all they saw was a faint smudge of light, not the spectacular tail that anybody in a dark sky could see. So light pollution has taken that away from us unnecessarily. We can have all the light we need for safety without ruining our health and wildlife and the view of the night sky. Thank you for your help doing that, and I'm happy to take questions and have a discussion now in the remaining time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, James. That was really wonderful. Before we dive into questions, I did want to quickly mention that there's GBCI CEU units available for this event, which we'll be emailing you instructions on that afterwards. And do also want to give a hearty thank you to James, in addition to Paul Bongiorni, for diligently kicking off this event by connecting us with James. And of course, to thank you to our sponsor, Apex Lighting Solutions. And if you, Paul, or anyone else would like to continue to stay engaged and either do presentations yourself or with your work, your company, or suggest speakers or topics, please don't hesitate to reach out to communications@ctgbc.org. And I'll be popping that now into the chat for reference. And yeah, Kate, please do kick us off with opening the floor to questions. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Joya. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, James. And thanks, Apex. But yeah, so I noticed that there were a couple of questions in the chat for you there, James. I think the first was, do you have different ways of talking about lighting quality to different stakeholders? And how do you start those conversations with municipalities, commercial clients, homeowners? I know, for example, for myself, it's definitely, being a lighting designer myself, it's definitely a very sensitive conversation to have sometimes, because certain clients may have standards that they say this is our standard on all of our buildings, or this is our standard throughout our campus, and explaining to them that their current standard isn't so great is sometimes a tricky conversation to have.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kate. That is absolutely at the core of this advocacy work, and it is. You've asked the hardest question. There's no silver bullet. If there were, this would have been a solved problem, because the science is very clear. There's no disagreement among really in the scientific community about any of the things that I've told you today. The disagreement is always, it's a social, it's about fear. It's about fear of the dark. It's about fear of litigation. Developers are often afraid of getting sued if they don't have enough light, even though there's I follow the case law, and I'm not aware of any successful lawsuit against a developer for having insufficient light. But there's a lot of fear of that. Obviously, people are worried about crime in the United States these days, and our combination of fear of the dark and fear of crime, it's like a perfect storm that says more light. We need more light, and you see that again and again. Every newspaper report that says, "Oh, it happened at night," and the city responds with more light. It's very, very common, even though the scientists say that's not going to help. Right? Crime comes from all these different effects, and it has to do with economy and social demographic issues, and there's so many factors in crime, and light just is lost in that shuffle. But convincing people of that is very, very hard to do. And you ask exactly the right question. I'll just give you my short. I know I've talked too much already, but to boil it down, I would say, do think about what the values are of your particular audience, whether you're talking to a neighbor or a municipal decision maker or a developer. Think about what they already care about, and think about what part of light pollution is most, and the ills of light pollution, the problems of light pollution, are most directly congruent with their issues. And some cities and towns have very, very different responses. And it's a funny thing with light pollution. you never know what's going to stick. So, we talked about the loss of the stars, the effect on animals and plants, the effect on humans, health effects, crime and safety, the night sky. You never know what's actually going to stick. And you can do your best to do your research ahead of time and find out what their values already are. You might still get it wrong, and it might hinge on just one person. So unfortunately, there's no silver bullet. Do your best to find out what they care about already and match your message.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I know for myself, I sometimes try to explain, like, if your eyes are super accustomed to this very, very bright light, and then you go into a dark area, now your eyes can't really see anything. It's not even necessarily glare, but just that super bright amount of light, and now your eyes are just accustomed to it, and you step outside or you step into the darkness and you can't see anything. So helping them understand that is sometimes key as well. And there was one other question too. Do you have any success stories where attention was driven to the nature of lighting when it wasn't already?
There are lots of success stories, yes, but not nearly enough.
Yeah.
I showed you pictures of Smith College, for example. It's basically a small city. It's got thousands of employees and thousands of students, and it's like a small town. And over the years, we have been able to engage with the administration in really productive ways, and they are sensitive to the issue now, and they think about it when they design pretty much any new building. And I showed you that beautiful library design. That would not have happened if we hadn't engaged in this discussion over years. It takes a long time. My city of Northampton, much less so. They're just not listening, and we can't get them to listen. And we've had hundreds of people signing petitions and telephoning the mayor and showing up at city council and writing letters to the editor, and the city still won't listen. It's like, no, we got this covered. Thank you very much. It really depends on who's in charge and who's making the decisions. And if you don't get a good ear high up in the hierarchy, then you have to do it from the grassroots, and it's much more work. But it's also rewarding because you can connect with different organizations, with environmental organizations, public health organizations, school organizations, crime and safety organizations, whatever it is. It's good to have those conversations and educate people about the issue, because most people just don't think it's an issue. They're not aware.
Yeah, certainly. Education is key for sure. I didn't see any additional questions in the chat, but if anybody that's still on would like to unmute themselves and ask any questions, please feel free.
M. Tapia says, thank you for thank you for that, for the kind words. Just wanting to share this presentation about circadian rhythm, sunlight, and melatonin from Dr. C. Sunlight, optimize health and immunity. Okay, I don't know this one. I will open it up and check it out. Thank you.
How to escape the heat if you don't have an air
I'm gonna turn it off.
conditioner. This only takes 5 minutes.
I think I've got it now.
Okay, well, if nobody else has any additional questions, just
actually, sorry. I do have a question. Is there much issue from indoor lighting being thrown off from the interior of a building? Does that much effect on the outside?
Thank you, Paul. And Paul, thank you again for all your good work and helping organize this and host it today. Yes, but it's at a much lower level than the outdoor lights. And you can prove this yourself just by, driving or walking or biking around your neighborhood at night and just assessing from a typical house, where is most of the light coming from? And I think you'll see it's almost always the porch light, the yard light, the light stuck on a post shining up in all directions. Once those lights are off, then yes, of course, the next most important thing is the light coming out of the windows of the house. But it's usually at, I'm going to just throw a number out, 10% or less of the outdoor lighting. Now, it's different, right? The indoor lighting is probably serving a purpose. Somebody's probably in there reading the paper or doing the dishes or visiting with their family or whatever. They're living in there. And of course, the light also has an effect on their health. And, when you're in your house, you should definitely minimize the amount of blue light for all the reasons we talked about. But at least it's being used. It is useful light. The porch light, much less so. The yard light, that's nominally for safety, but as I've tried to argue, that's probably not is not useful light. So there are these various factors that influence people's decision to turn a light on or not, or to install it or not. And it's also a question of private property and privacy. Like, I'm in my own house, I can do whatever I want. Of course you can. Is it going to affect the outdoors? Yes, at a much smaller level than all the outdoor lights and the street lights, etc. But let's just say if we get to that point, that'll be a quality problem. Like, I'll be happy if we can get to the point where we really have to worry about the indoor lights coming out.
Yeah, that would be the ideal problem to try to solve, right? At this point. Thank you, Paul. Tanya has a question. Are there dark skies approved residential flood light bulbs?
Yeah, it depends what you mean by floodlight. There are lights that I use on my porch that are called floodlight, but they're like the ones that I showed you that have, it's got a pretty well-defined narrow beam. And as long as it's installed in a fixture that is down facing only, that's not facing out sideways or up like this, as long as it's down facing, it's coming down in a beam, then it's fine. And it might not be IDA approved, but you can just verify for yourself. Let me just pull up that picture. So you see.
I'm referring to, like, the floodlights that people attach to the side of their houses that just kind of point out. I mean, is there any solution for those? They're so horrible.
They're so horrible. Yeah, they're really, really bad. And they're basically doing the same thing that these lights are doing here. And we fix those by just adjusting the angle. Most of the ones that you can get, garage lights that you just buy at Home Depot that you stick on the side of your house, they have adjustable angles, but some of them, you can't even point them straight down. It's not possible. So those are bad. And unfortunately,
yeah, I didn't know if there was a light bulb that kind of makes it not so, because there's those bright, yes. They're blue, again,
this light bulb will do much better. So if you can replace the light bulb, which you almost certainly can, then you can change the super bright, super blue wide angle one with a much warmer color, like 2700K, no more than 3000K, and a narrow angle and low wattage, like 5 watts. It's like 500 lumens. Yeah, that'll make a big difference.
Type of light bulb is called what? It doesn't matter. It's just go by the wattage and the.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll specify it because it's just they're just so horrible.
Yeah.
And people have to stop putting them in. So
the specs are the wattage, the color, and the design. Is it going out in all directions or is it just in a narrow beam?
Okay, so it's 5 watts, and then the spectrum would be just like a warm white.
That's right. If it looks like this, then it's going to be sending the light, in a more narrow beam. And I see Joya has a hand up.
Oh yeah, I thought it was really interesting what you were talking about related to like sort of public health and crime together in lighting. I have done a couple of architectural studios in New York where light, like high glare light, is actually used as an oppressive tool. Like high glare lighting shining into affordable housing units windows, and this like this sort of oppressive nature that can come from poor quality lighting, and I think that ties pretty closely with some other talks that we are in the process of organizing related to light. Which keep an eye to your inboxes, and if you had this forwarded to you, please do become a member of Connecticut Green Building Council so you can get on our mailing list. But we have a lot more really exciting projects coming up that I think, James, we would love your presence and additions to discussions.
Thank you for that, Joya. That's a really good point you made. Here's the International Dark Sky Association's page on social justice and injustice from lighting. Lighting has been used for surveillance for decades and decades. And given what we know about it being bad for human health and bad for quality of life, it's a social justice issue. So thanks for bringing that up. And I will stay tuned.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, this is Alicia. I put a comment in the chat, but I might as well just unmute myself. I just wanted to say, and I said this when we were gathering ahead of the presentation, that this is not an area that I have expertise in, and yet I couldn't resist the pun, but you made this also illuminating. But seriously, you made the material very accessible and easy to comprehend. But I think more importantly, there were so many points in your presentation where I was like, I didn't know that. Wow, that's really important to me. And I think that gets at those sort of underlying values. You scratch underneath the surface and all of a sudden you can get someone's attention. And I was thinking, about this question of how do you reach different stakeholders, particularly, most of us don't have expertise in this area. And I was like, you would be perfect for a TED Talk because you're extremely good presenter. And someone shared that you have done 10 talks on this issue. So I'm wondering, is that correct? And if so, what's the title of the talk?
I'll pop it in the chat. Thank you so much for those kind words. And here is a link to my TEDx talk. And I just have to say, there are others out there. If you just do a search for TED Talk and light pollution, you'll find a bunch. And I'm sure there are plenty that are better than mine and more updated or that appeal to particular people in a particular way. Thank you for that. And thank you especially for hosting, because this is a way to help get the word out.
Our pleasure.
Thank you,
Yeah.
James.
Thank you. And just thank you to everyone who's still on. Thank you to everyone for coming. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to the CTGBC email, and we can certainly put you in touch with James. And James, I don't know if you have an email address that you'd like to share with everyone. Perfect.
Yes, that is it. jamesastron@gmail.com will do. And happy to be in touch with anybody.
Great. And thank you again to today's sponsor, Apex Lighting Solutions. We really appreciate your sponsorship. And if anybody has another presentation that they'd like to give, lighting related or not, please also be sure to reach out to us. And thank you again, everyone. Happy Wednesday.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
You guys, thank you.
Thank you so much.